Welcome back to the Botanical Gardens here in Medellín, Colombia. My name is Andrew White. I am the Vice President of the Colombian Association of Journalists and Science Communicators. I'm very, very happy to welcome you back to the Botanical Gardens. It's a bit rainy outside, so we're inside, and I've got a few special treats for you this afternoon. The first is our interview with our panelists, and after that we have some video footage from last night. Last night we had the big opening ceremony welcoming people from all over the world. I think we're up over 24 different countries have come, people from 24 different countries have come to visit us. And so you'll get to hear the speech from our president, Jimena Serrano Gil, and as well the president of the World Federation of Science Journalists, Alicia Milonovic. And so we will start with the In Conversation part today. We had 3 different talks. Unfortunately, the coffee session, we had the head scientist from Seni Cafe, which is a coffee research laboratory here in Colombia with over 80 PhDs working on the future of coffee. Unfortunately, he had to get back to the airport, but we do have 2 speakers from the other session, so I'll throw to them now. So, Purple, if you could just explain who you are, where you're from, who you work for, and also what brings you to the conference and your session today. Tell us a bit about it.
Hi, Andrew. Hello, everyone. I'm Purple Romero. I'm a Filipino journalist who has moved to Hong Kong and have been working there for about 4 years now. I work as a supervising editor for the fact-checking organization ANILAB. ANI means Asian Network of News Information and Educators. I came here to Medellín, Colombia to do a presentation along with 2 other panelists on giving a jab or inoculation against misinformation. Like, can you really vaccinate yourself against misinformation? And basically, we've talked about different methods on how to do it, as well as the differences and then the complementarity between debunking and pre-bunking. So Raccoon, who's a researcher, he gave an example of the different games they developed against climate misinformation, against COVID-19 misinformation. The idea of inoculation is that you expose yourselves to different strategies or kinds of misinformation. So the more you get exposed to them, the more you familiarize yourself with them, the more you protect yourself against them. Okay? And in our end, from ANILAB, what we do as form of pre-banking is that we teach our students from University of Hong Kong the different ways on how real, actual journalists also unfortunately contribute to the problem of misinformation through misleading headlines, through clickbait, through omission of certain contexts and data. So that's what I said in the panel earlier. And then one of our panelists, Michael, who's from lie detectors, deal with kids this time around. If I work at the university as a journalist, he trains like young pupils on how to debunk misinformation done by the adults, by us. So that's what went, and we learned a lot also from the audiences, because the audiences gave examples of the different tools, and then one common denominator is WhatsApp, being used to spread different debunks of different specific kinds of misinformation.
One of the interesting, I've actually done a lot of work on this during COVID. I think that we all sort of became epidemiologists and also sort of misinformation sources as well. So when you look at like these WhatsApp chains and how quickly they can spread, and you know, people go, you'll get a WhatsApp chain and it's like really wrong, and you're like, I could spend the next 45 minutes convincing this person and sending them all the links and doing the research, but then in that time, like 6 new crazy things have come through. So did you guys talk about how there's this sort of this speed, this arms race, that like it's so much easier to spread misinformation than it is to cure or to prevent misinformation? So what were some of the things that were discussed around that?
So about the speed, aside from that, what actually was brought up was who spreads it. Like, who sends you the messages on WhatsApp? Because the spread of misinformation is a chain of personal connections. It's your mom, it's your uncle, it's your aunt, it's someone you know is actually sending you the misinformation. So it raises a different layer of complexity because it's a matter of trust. Like you trust these people, right? You trust your family members. So how do we address that kind of complexity? It's a long, arduous kind of task, but we're looking, as what Raccoon said and emphasized also, that if we want to go for the long-term solutions, building trust is very difficult, but we have to do it. And how so? By us teaching them, like these are different kinds of strategies and techniques of misinformation. So in our case, I would say, because we go to the university level, the students, once they learn these types of misinformation from us, they tell their mothers, like, Mom, this is what your daughter learned. Now it's up to you. But I'm teaching you this. And I'm not teaching, but I'm sharing you this because I care about you. So it's also about the messaging. Like, what's the intent? I mean, as a journalist, as educators, basically a stranger to you, you may not trust me. But if it's a person who loves you and someone who also cares for you, then maybe the level of trust is higher.
And it seems like trust is really important. In Colombia, the statistics are quite amazing that they do like a sort of trust pilot survey and found that the only institution that anyone trusted at all was family. Not church, not government, not companies, no one except family. And so it seems like it is a bit of a double-edged sword that maybe it is your family members who are spreading this disinformation, but it sounds like the peer-to-peer prevention is also going through the same channel, and maybe those things can spread just as fast so that you can train up troops so that you don't have to fight every battle as a journalist, because I know that so many journalists felt so burnt out during the pandemic because we felt like we knew how to read a preprint, we knew how to interpret data, and that it was our job not to only explain it to our readers, but to our partners and to our families. And that was really exhausting, and that work hasn't stopped. But I think it's really interesting, that peer-to-peer. Maybe we'll pass to Sandy now. So Sandy, you're, just give us a sense of where you're from, and both place-wise and institution-wise, and what the panel talked about today, and maybe what the other panelists also talked about.
Sure, thanks so much, Andrew. So my name is Sanderson Oni, more commonly known as Sandy. I'm a researcher at the Black Dog Institute, and I lead programs globally in terms of digital interventions to increase mental health and reduce suicide. And a lot of the work that I do is surrounding national strategies and how can we really reduce suicide. I'm coming off COVID-19, and we know that in the first year of COVID-19, there was a spike of 25% in depression and anxiety. And we talked about this in the panel about what are the mental health and suicide conditions now, and some of the digital interventions. So going back to the statistics, we know that suicide is one of the leading causes of death for young people in many, many different countries. And the horrific thing is that for every suicide death, there are 30 times the number of attempts compared to deaths. But what we're actually seeing in countries with even more developed mental health systems is that less than 40% of people who die by suicide will reach out for professional services prior to the attempt. So there's a real need to meet them where they are, to reach out to these people and to extend a hand to them. So we covered a lot of digital interventions because they're scalable, and a lot of the times they're implementable in a lot of places, even they may not have the human resources to do so. For example, one of the topics we talked about is using advertising algorithms. So a lot of people that may not seek help might actually search up suicide-related keywords on the internet. So it's just about showing them an ad and using the tailoring features to show different ads to different people so that the message that they're getting is as relevant as possible. The data coming from there is that whether it's in the US or Australia or Indonesia, it's far and above the industry standard levels of engagement, indicating there's a real need in that area. In addition to that, we can use the search data as an analog or proxy for suicidality as we see the different search volumes in different postcodes in different countries. We also talked about different WhatsApp interventions, different apps as well. For example, there's this one that we talked about, which is WhatsApp-based, but it seeks to improve relationships and community, because we know loneliness is a very big factor in terms of mental health. But what I find really interesting, Andrew, is that even though our session is titled digital interventions from the global south. Because mental health and suicide is so close to all of us, we started discussing a lot of things. For example, what is the role of families in people's well-being, mental health, and depression? What is the role of pharmacological interventions such as psychiatric drugs? How do we pair that with therapy? We even talked about, what about gender tailoring? For example, we had a question where in one country there was a high incidence of, unfortunately, sexual assault for women. How do we pair that with the treatment of anxiety and depression?
Okay, so one of the interesting things about this is that your co-speaker was talking about Malaysia and a lot of the other apps that have been developed there. And do you think that, when we think of, solutions, we go, okay, well, what are the North Americans or the Europeans or the Australians developing that can help these like poor global South people? And that's really not the case. It feels like these solutions are coming from Malaysia, are being developed in Indonesia to help people in those countries. And why do you think that's important, this sort of South, the solution coming from where the problem is?
Absolutely. Because I think there's a real history of people coming and thinking they know a little bit better.
Yeah.
And mental health and well-being will tie into things such as family, relationship, identity, and they're so personal to each culture. For example, as I might have mentioned in the session, is that the Indonesian word for mental health is a sickness of the soul. And it's the same with Malaysia as well. So rather than generalizing a lot of the findings that we might find in the global north, we have to start co-designing and co-developing these interventions from the global south. Case in point, there was this one study that was conducted in Indonesia, where I think it's a beautiful illustration of this. They set up support groups, which is sort of the most stereotypical format of psychological support we can think of, like support groups.
Like that's
right?
what you see in the movies.
Exactly,
Yeah.
like they go to a support group, they introduce themselves, and they set it up all across the country. It's well-funded, everything's great. Not a single one lasted. Not a single one until it was culturally adapted. So to some degree, there is a lot of research, but we do have to recognize that the research is not representative of the entire globe. It's predominantly by the global north.
Yeah.
And we have to trust that a lot of people in the local cultures, they know what they need. Because whereas people might have read about the culture, they grew up in it. And so I think that's why it's really important.
Yeah. So I think my final question will be a repeat of one that I asked you in the session about how using this search data, the ads that you were able to sort of create this proxy for suicide ideation, which is like when people are talking about suicide, right? So, and maybe we will be able to detect those things in a much more precise and much more inclusive way than, for example, countries where there is no one's asking those questions at a governmental level, or they're not being able to get into rural areas or get into very urban areas. So could you sort of speak to what is the potential of this intervention that you guys are doing, and how could that actually allow us to update how big a problem this is? Because maybe we would find that actually the world has a much bigger, we think it's a big problem now, it could be much bigger than we thought.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Where one of the papers that we discussed is that findings in the US, where mental health literacy is relatively higher, they found that the volume for Google searches for suicide-related keywords outperformed their national mental health survey in predicting each state's suicide rate. So even in the US, where we consider that, yeah, they've got a really good monitoring system, no, there's a lot more that we're not seeing. So the great thing about the search ads intervention and being able to use that as a proxy is that we can roll that out anywhere in the world where the infrastructure is there. And even in a lot of rural areas, even though the internet might be a little bit slower, everyone is using search. It's just part of our day-to-day life now. So we're able to cross-reference each country. We're able to cross-reference the severity of the keywords, the volume of the keywords, and even understand the cultural nuances of what people are searching up. For example, just in the Indonesian data that we've just collected, one of the keywords people are searching are people destined to die by suicide, because that's a major topic in sort of Indonesian understanding, and we're able to do that for each country.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, well, I think we'll leave it there for our conversation part of this particular episode. I think that it's really great to have all these perspectives, and particularly that with perspectives from Asia, from other parts of the world. And I'm so grateful to our speakers. I think you guys have probably traveled the farthest to be here. Yeah, we're really grateful to have you. So next up, we have the video of Jimena Serrano Gil, our president of the Colombian Science Journalists and Communicators, and we also have the President of the World Federation speaking last night underneath the Orquídea Rama, and please enjoy.
Now I'm handing the mic over to Milica Momcilovic, President of the World Federation of Science Journalists.
Muchas gracias, Nico. Welcome, colleagues and friends of the World Federation of Science Journalists. I have a huge pleasure to see you all here, particularly after the postponement of the pandemic years. I know that we will make the most of catching up with old friends, making new connections, and rejuvenating our professional networks. I believe that independent journalism is the lifeblood of democracy. And as the president of the Federation, my focus has been and will continue to be supporting independent journalism around the world. The World Federation of Science Journalists is made of 70 membership associations from 67 countries on 5 continents. This week represents the first time that the conference has returned to Latin America for over 20 years, and we are thrilled to be here. We are over the moon that we have attendees here in Medellín for over 62 countries, sharing knowledge and best practice and firming up the international collaboration we have aspired to with the Federation and with our membership associations. We want to acknowledge good journalism and hold to account poor practices. We want to help young reporters around the world who are stepping up and will benefit from this international network. The Federation is in the privileged position to be able to connect reporters and provide professional development both at this conference and beyond. During my presidency, I have worked hard to ensure that the Federation supports journalists in the Global South and encourages new voices and talented science reporting communities around the world. I have seen firsthand how their work can be changed and can make the change in the world for the better. During the conference, they will be telling us the stories in person here. The Federation has worked in the last few years to become more financially sustainable. We have broadened our contacts and we are working on several projects that I look forward to sharing details of in due course. For this, I thank our WFSJ friends for support and trust. Today, I have greatly enjoyed attending some of the plenaries and panels. Often at these conferences, the WFSJ board will be occupied with side meetings, discussions. But this time in Medellín, we, my colleagues here present from the board of the Federation, agreed we will be focused on the conference. I hope, like my fellows and me, you will make the most of your time here in the beautiful surroundings of the Jardín Botánico, get the best out of debates and discussions, and enjoy the wonderful city of Medellín. For now, I want to thank the various groups of individuals who have worked so hard to make the conference happen. The program committee, who ensured we have a rich and diverse program, the steering committee, 5 presidents from the Latin American associations who have provided feedback and ideas, and we have gone along. Last but not least, my colleagues on the organizing committee, Jimena Serrano-Gil, Andrew Wright, Tanya Valubena. And now, I hand over to Jimena Serrano-Gil, who you all already know. Thank you, Jimena. Muchas gracias for everything you have done so far. Bienvenidos a Medellín.
Thank you, Milica, for those words. And now, Jimena Serrano-Gil. She's the president of the ACPC and director of the Medellín Conference. Please welcome her with an applause.
Gracias, Nico. Bueno, buenas noches. Esto es un hecho, yo me siento realmente feliz y emocionada de verlos a todos reunidos en este espacio, un espacio maravilloso que espero les haya encantado a todos. Me encanta encontrar los amigos de siempre, reconocer a aquellos que nos conocimos virtualmente por tema de pandemia, pero lo que más me gusta realmente es ver estas nuevas caras de estas nuevas generaciones entusiastas de periodistas científicos que están abordando el mundo y queremos que sean más, muchísimos más, que este sea un espacio de conexión, de intercambio, de crecimiento y demostrarle al mundo que trabajando colaborativamente desde el periodismo podemos, como dice Militza, cambiar al mundo. Así que vamos, simplemente a mí me parece que esto es la realidad y esto lo único que significa es que con convicción los sueños se realizan, los sueños se vuelven una realidad. Ayer me paré al fondo del escenario y por un momento dije, esto es un hecho, realmente lo logramos. La Conferencia Mundial de Periodistas Científicos está en Medellín, está en Colombia, está en Latinoamérica, está en el sur global. Es para todos nosotros. Gracias. Cuando nosotros postulamos a Colombia como sede de la Conferencia Mundial, realmente nos dijeron locos y atrevidos. Y sí, fuimos atrevidos, nos atrevimos a hacer la conferencia, nos atrevimos a traer la conferencia y nos atrevimos a regalarles a todos ustedes, particularmente a Latinoamérica y al sur global, este maravilloso evento que solamente nos engrandece a nosotros. Así que… definitivamente lo hemos dicho todos, lo ha dicho la secretaria, el representante, todos los representantes, Militza lo ha dicho también. Colombia y Medellín son ese hotpost de la biodiversidad, es un laboratorio inigualable para ayudar a otras naciones en la adaptación del cambio climático, con un modelo de cómo alimentar a las poblaciones en unos entornos tropicales en rápida evolución, y un depósito cultural donde miles de ciudadanos, de culturas indígenas, de pueblos indígenas, pueden hacer una contribución duradera al conocimiento y a la transmisión de este conocimiento para generaciones futuras. Y realmente queremos que realmente con esto, con lo que han dicho desde las diferentes secretarías, que el mundo lo sepa, que el mundo sepa qué se hace en Colombia, qué tenemos en Latinoamérica y ustedes son los encargados de compartir toda esta información. La oportunidad definitivamente de compartir ideas, de colaborar en estos que son invaluables realmente en estos eventos, es una de las acciones que nosotros debemos continuar y tenemos que crear estas plataformas que faciliten estas interacciones. Ya lo dijo Militza, cuál es la finalidad también desde la federación, desde lo que ella ha venido trabajando y toda la junta directiva. Así que hoy entregamos la bandera y esperamos que cualquier país o diferentes países del sur global la tomen, que sea una realidad, que podamos seguir trayendo esta conferencia a los diferentes rincones del planeta. Y bueno, pues para eso están los diferentes delegados. Me enorgullece cuando escucho a uno de los delegados decir, el hecho de que se haga en Colombia me motiva para que yo me la pueda llevar a otro continente. Eso me encanta, del sur global. Obviamente que esto no se habría podido lograr sin el apoyo de personas y aliados que han sido incondicionales. Por lo tanto, yo sí quiero agradecerle a la Federación por el compromiso, pero muy especialmente a Militza por su dedicación y por las largas horas de trabajo que hemos tenido de madrugada durante este último año para que lleguemos a buen puerto. A MCI también le queremos agradecer por su gestión y coordinación, pero quiero también hacer un especial reconocimiento y agradecimiento al equipo de la ACPC, mi equipo, el equipo de todos ustedes, que hoy están aquí, que están apoyando para que sea un éxito. y obviamente con mis coequiperos que son incondicionales, mi mano derecha, mi mano izquierda, mi pie derecho, mi pie izquierdo, Tania Balbuena y Andrew Wright. Sin ellos realmente no lo habría logrado. Y veo cómo la energía de todos ellos, combinada con el entusiasmo de las demás personas que han colaborado, pues son realmente el motor desde la ACPC para que nosotros podamos estar hoy aquí. También quiero agradecer a todas aquellas entidades que desde el territorio nos han apoyado para llegar a este punto, entre ellos la Alcaldía de Medellín, que nos abrió las puertas de la ciudad, nos entregó la llave de la ciudad para poder que todos ustedes estuvieran aquí. La Gobernación de Antioquia, que nos ha entregado muchísimos beneficios también, y la maravillosa descripción de lo que es la región, de lo que es el territorio antioqueño. A la Universidad EAFIT, que ha sido incondicional. Mi querido Oscar, muchísimas gracias. Al Buró de Medellín, que fue el primer bastión con el que logramos postular a Colombia para que fuera la sede. Así que aquí tengo a Andrés Restrepo, a quien también le agradezco su constante apoyo. A ProColombia, por supuesto, que asumió también la bandera como identidad país, porque eso era lo que necesitábamos mostrar. ¿Qué es Colombia? Al Jardín Botánico, por supuesto, a la Universidad de Antioquia, al CIAT, que ha sido grandioso, que está generando muchísimo conocimiento y que les va a ofrecer a ustedes un maravilloso paseo para que sepan y se enteren de cómo se hace ciencia realmente. Al Parque Explora, que ha sido un maravilloso aliado desde un comienzo. Al Metro de Medellín, por supuesto, al ICBIS, centro de investigación con quien hemos trabajado muchísimo y están convencidos de la importancia de la divulgación de la ciencia. Y finalmente al canal RCN, Radio y Televisión, que son nuestros aliados estratégicos. Así que quiero decirles que Colombia es una tierra mágica. Nosotros somos mágicos y esperamos que esa magia los motive a todos y los impulse para seguir fortaleciendo el periodismo científico en todos los rincones del planeta, que este sea el motor de aquí en adelante, particularmente para estas nuevas generaciones que van a encontrar todo el apoyo en la federación para seguir construyendo desde sus diferentes territorios. Desde la ACPC y la organización de la conferencia le damos la bienvenida a la Conferencia Mundial de Periodistas Científicos, a Medellín, a Colombia y a disfrutar. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Jimena. And thank you to all of our speakers, and in particular to Militza and Jimena, for all of your hard work and all the time you've spent making sure this is such a success. I need to make a brief announcement. Give me a second.